The Montana sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and purple as Sarah Blackwood's 18-wheeler rolled to a stop outside Earl's roadside diner. The neon open sign flickered against the growing darkness, a beacon for weary travelers on this forgotten stretch of interstate. Sarah's reflection caught her eye in the side mirror, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, laugh lines around her eyes that had deepened with her 38 years. Most people saw only what she wanted them to see, a woman making her living on the endless ribbon of asphalt that connected America's small towns. They didn't notice how her eyes constantly scanned her surroundings or how she never sat with her back to the door. Some habits died hard, especially the ones that had kept her alive. As she stepped down from the ground, her boots crunching on the gravel, she didn't notice the three motorcycles that slowed on the highway behind her, their riders exchanging meaningful glances before continuing past the diner. She didn't see when one of them pulled out a phone speaking urgently while staring at her license plate. She didn't know that before the night was over, blood would stain this gravel lot, and the quiet life she'd built would shatter like the windshield she was about to put someone through. But deep down, perhaps she'd been waiting for this day all along. Earl's diner smelled like it always did: coffee, grease, and apple pie. The bell above the door announced Sarah's arrival, and several heads turned her way. A few regular drivers raised their mugs in greeting. To them, she was just Sarah, the woman who ran Blackwood Transport, a small but reliable shipping company. Pretty enough to turn heads, tough enough to hold her own in the male-dominated trucking world. "The usual Sarah," Earl called from behind the counter. The 60-something owner had been serving coffee at this spot since before Sarah was born. "You know it," she replied, sliding onto her favorite stool at the counter, the one with the clear view of both the entrance and the parking lot. Another old habit. Earl set down a mug of black coffee and leaned in close. "Heard about those iron vultures?" he asked, voice lowered. "Been making trouble up and down I-90. Highway patrol's been looking for them." Sarah's face remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Can't say that I have," she lied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. In truth, she'd been tracking news of the motorcycle gang for weeks. Earl nodded toward the small television mounted in the corner. A local news report showed grainy surveillance footage of men in leather jackets with distinctive vulture patches emblazoned on their backs. The ticker at the bottom read, "Biker gang suspected in string of thefts and assaults across 3 states. Been hitting truckers too," Earl continued. "Freight theft intimidation. Nasty business." Sarah took a slow sip of her coffee. "I'll keep an eye out." As Earl moved away to serve other customers, Sarah studied the screen more intently. The camera had caught a clear shot of one man, tall, powerfully built, with a distinctive tattoo of a hammer on his neck. The caption identified him as Mason Davis, known as the Hammer, a person of interest in connection with the gang's activities. Something about his face triggered a memory, but Sarah pushed it aside. The past was the past. She had worked hard to leave it buried. The silver pendant around her neck caught the light as she leaned forward. Most people thought it was just decorative and unusual geometric design that looked vaguely military. None of her trucker friends knew it was the emblem of a classified FBI tactical unit that officially didn't exist. Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "Iron birds migrating north. Cargo valuable. Eyes open." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Only one person would send that message using their old code. Director Ellis. The man who had recruited her 14 years ago, trained her, and ultimately given her a new identity when she'd walked away 5 years back. If he was reaching out now, something big was happening. Sarah deleted the message and finished her coffee in one long swallow. She needed to get back on the road. Her delivery schedule provided the perfect cover, a legitimate reason to be anywhere at any time. Her truck's hidden compartments held more than spare parts. They concealed equipment that no ordinary trucker would carry. Just as she laid a $10 bill on the counter, the bell above the door rang again. The diner fell suddenly unnaturally quiet. 6 men entered, their leather jackets adorned with the Iron Vulture's insignia. At their center stood Mason Davis, his 6'4" frame dominating the space. The hammer tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. "Nice place you got here," Mason announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone used to intimidating others. "Hope you don't mind if me and my brothers grab a bite." Earl, to his credit, maintained his professional demeanor. "Seat yourselves anywhere. Menus are on the tables." Sarah kept her eyes down, stirring the dregs of her coffee, her posture deliberately casual. But her senses were heightened, cataloging details with practiced precision. 6 men, at least 3 visible weapons poorly concealed under jackets. Mason had a knife strapped to his ankle, amateur move. The youngest of the group, barely 20, kept touching his waistband, nervous, probably carrying a gun he'd never fired outside a range. The oldest, a weather-beaten 50-something with a gray beard, was the most dangerous, his eyes constantly moving, assessing the mark of someone who'd seen real violence. The bikers spread out, taking a booth near the door. Mason, however, sauntered to the counter, choosing the stool right next to Sarah. "What's good here, darling?" he asked, not looking at the menu. "I'm not your darling," Sarah replied evenly, still not making eye contact. "And the apple pie's decent." Mason chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Got a mouth on you, huh? I like that in a woman." He leaned closer, invading her space. "That your rig outside Blackwood Transport?" Now Sarah turned to look at him, her blue eyes cold. "It is." "Nice setup. Independent operator, huh? Must be tough all alone on these roads." His smile revealed a chipped front tooth. "Lots of dangerous types out there. I manage." Mason's eyes traveled over her, taking in the fitted flannel shirt, the worn jeans, the boots that had seen thousands of miles. "I bet you do, but everyone needs protection sometimes." He lowered his voice. "My boys and I, we provide security services for independent truckers in this territory. Insurance, you might say." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I've already got insurance, thanks." Mason's smile faded slightly. "Not the kind I'm talking about. See, accidents happen on the road. Hijackings, trucks get damaged, drivers get hurt." He reached out, brushing a finger against her pendant. "Pretty necklace." Sarah's hand shot up, grabbing his wrist in a grip that made his eyes widen in surprise. She applied just enough pressure on a nerve point to send a clear message, then released him as if nothing had happened. "Don't touch what isn't yours," she said quietly. For a split second, confusion crossed Mason's face, quickly replaced by anger. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a woman who barely cleared 5'7". But something in her eyes, something cold and assessing, made him hesitate. "No offense meant," he said, rubbing his wrist casually. "Just being friendly. Think about my offer, though. 300 a week buys you safe passage through our territory. Cheap at twice the price." He slid a business card across the counter. "In case you change your mind." Sarah picked up the card, examining it briefly before slipping it into her pocket. "I'll do that." She stood, leaving the money on the counter. As she walked toward the door, she could feel Mason's eyes on her back, calculating, reassessing. The other patrons studiously avoided looking her way, suddenly fascinated by their meals. Earl caught her eye as she passed, a question in his gaze. Sarah gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Don't intervene. Don't get involved." Outside, the evening had deepened into full darkness. Sarah walked to her truck, every sense alert. The parking lot was poorly lit, with deep shadows between the few vehicles present. Perfect ambush territory. She walked with purpose, keys already in hand, taking a route that kept her back from being exposed for too long. Inside the cab of her truck, Sarah locked the doors and took a deep breath. Then she pulled out her phone and the business card Mason had given her. She snapped a photo of the card and sent it to the same unknown number that had texted her earlier. No accompanying message needed. While waiting for a response, she opened a hidden compartment beneath her seat, revealing a sleek Glock 19. She checked it quickly, then returned it to its hiding place. Another compartment, this one behind the sleeping berth, contained surveillance equipment that would make most law enforcement agencies envious. Her phone vibrated. A single message, confirmed link. "Bigger than we thought. Proceed with caution." Sarah started the engine, the familiar rumble providing a strange comfort. As she pulled out onto the highway, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The Iron Vulture's motorcycles remained parked outside the diner. They weren't following, not yet. She drove for an hour, maintaining exactly 5 miles over the speed limit, fast enough to make good time, slow enough to avoid unwanted attention from highway patrol. Her mind worked through possibilities, contingencies. The Iron Vultures were small time as criminal organizations went, but they were expanding rapidly. Director Ellis wouldn't have contacted her unless they were connected to something significant. When she was certain no one was following, Sarah pulled into an abandoned rest stop. The place had been closed for renovation, its parking lot empty and dark. Perfect. She backed her rig into a position that gave her clear sightlines in all directions, then moved to the sleeping compartment. From a hidden safe, she retrieved a satellite phone untraceable secure. She dialed a number from memory. "It's me," she said when the line connected. "Blackwood." The voice on the other end was male authoritative. Director Robert Ellis, the man who had shaped her from a promising FBI recruit into something more specialized. "It's been a while." "Not long enough if you're calling me back in," Sarah replied. "I'm retired, remember." "We both know that was never going to stick." A pause. "You made contact." "They made contact with me. Mason Davis, hammer tattoo just like the surveillance photos, offered me protection for my trucking business." "What's your assessment?" Sarah considered. "They're expanding operations, moving from simple intimidation to a structured protection racket. They've got resources organization. The way they've spread across state lines suggests coordination beyond what a typical motorcycle gang would have." "Your instincts are still sharp," Ellis said. "We think the Iron Vultures are just the visible face of something much larger. They've been moving product across state lines, not just drugs, but weapons, military grade." Sarah frowned. "That's not their style. They don't have those kinds of connections." "Someone's backing them. Someone with resources, connections to international suppliers." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "You think it's him, don't you? That's why you contacted me specifically." Ellis's silence was confirmation enough. "Charles Whitman," Sarah said, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. "The ghost." "We don't know for certain," Ellis cautioned, "but the operational patterns match his methodology, creating layers of deniability using existing criminal organizations as cover." Sarah unconsciously touched the scar on her abdomen, hidden beneath her shirt. 5 years ago, Charles Whitman, a former CIA operative gone rogue, had put a bullet through her during an operation in Chicago. She had survived. Her partner hadn't been so lucky. "I left that life behind," she said, her voice hardening. "I built something new." "Did you really, Sarah? Or did you just build the perfect cover independent trucker, constantly moving, no fixed address? Always watching, always ready?" Ellis paused. "You never stopped looking over your shoulder, did you?" Sarah didn't answer. They both knew the truth. "We're not asking you to come back permanently," Ellis continued. "Just help us confirm the connection. If Whitman is behind this, we need to know. You're already on their radar as a potential target for their protection racket. Use that. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. But Sarah, if it is him, wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't you rather be prepared when he eventually finds you? Because we both know he hasn't forgotten you either." The scar seemed to throb with phantom pain. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, images flashing behind her eyelids. Blood on concrete, her partner's vacant stare, Whitman's cold smile as he pulled the trigger. "I'll need resources," she said finally. "Equipment. Backup on standby." "Already arranged. There's a storage locker in Billings. Code is your old badge number. Everything you need is there." Ellis hesitated. "Two of your former team members are on standby, Jackson and Martinez. They're in position if you need them." Sarah felt a surge of emotion at the names. Daniel Jackson and Sophia Martinez had been part of her tactical unit, people she had trusted with her life countless times. "I work alone," she said firmly. "They're there if you change your mind. Check in every 12 hours. If we don't hear from you, I know the protocol." Sarah ended the call, setting the satellite phone aside. She stared out at the darkness beyond her windshield. 5 years of carefully constructed normalcy threatened by ghosts from her past. Part of her wanted to drive away, disappear into the vastness of America's highways. She'd done it before, built a new identity from scratch. But another part, the part she'd tried to bury, hummed with a familiar energy. The hunt, the purpose, the chance to finally close the chapter that had ended with her partner's death and her own retreat from the world she'd known. Sarah started the engine. She had a delivery to make in Billings tomorrow, and apparently a storage locker to visit. Dawn was breaking as Sarah pulled into the delivery depot in Billings. She went through the motions, mechanically, paperwork, unloading, casual conversation with the warehouse manager. Her mind was elsewhere, calculating risks and contingencies. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a nondescript building with keypad access and minimal security cameras. Sarah parked her rig a block away and approached on foot, a baseball cap pulled low over her face, her stride purposeful but unremarkable. The locker opened with her old badge number, just as Ellis had promised. Inside, she found exactly what she needed. Surveillance equipment more advanced than what she already had, secure communications weapons, body armor, medical supplies. At the bottom of a duffel bag was a leather wallet containing credentials identifying her as an active FBI special agent, her old life packaged and waiting for her return. She took what she needed, leaving the credentials behind. This wasn't an official operation, and she had no intention of identifying herself as law enforcement. That would only complicate matters and potentially put civilians at risk. Back at her truck, Sarah carefully integrated the new equipment with her existing setup. By mid-morning, she was back on the road headed west on I-90. According to her legitimate shipping schedule, she had a pickup in Missoula the following day. The route would take her directly through what the Iron Vultures considered their territory. Perfect bait. She stopped for lunch at a truck stop near Bozeman, deliberately choosing a place frequented by other independent truckers. As she ate her sandwich, she engaged in casual conversation, dropping subtle questions about route security and mentioning problems with theft. Word would spread. In these tight-knit communities, information traveled fast. By late afternoon, she was back on the highway, the Montana landscape unfolding around her in vast expanses of rugged beauty. The radio reported a storm moving in from the west, heavy rain expected overnight. Sarah smiled grimly. Bad weather meant fewer witnesses. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Sarah spotted them. 3 motorcycles maintaining a consistent distance behind her. Not close enough to be obvious, but definitely following. The Iron Vultures had taken the bait. She continued driving as if unaware, maintaining her speed, checking her mirrors at normal intervals. Inside, though, her mind had shifted into operational mode, assessing options, planning moves, and countermoves. About 20 miles east of Butte, the highway narrowed, passing through a section of road with steep embankments on either side. No exits, no witnesses, minimal traffic due to the approaching storm. The perfect spot for an ambush. Sure enough, as she rounded a curve, she saw the blockade. 2 pickup trucks positioned across the highway, forcing her to stop. The motorcycles behind her had closed the distance, cutting off any retreat. Sarah slowed her truck, her expression calm, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. This was happening sooner than she'd anticipated, but she was ready. She brought the 18-wheeler to a complete stop about 50 yards from the blockade. Men emerged from the pickup trucks, 4 of them, including Mason Davis. All armed, their postures aggressive. The 3 motorcyclists pulled up behind her truck, effectively boxing her in. Sarah reached beneath her seat, retrieving her Glock and a small tactical knife, which she slipped into her boot. Then she took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped down from the cab. "Evening, gentlemen," she called, her voice carrying in the still air. "There a problem with the road?" Mason stepped forward, his massive frame silhouetted against the headlights of one of the pickup trucks. "No problem at all, Ms. Blackwood. Just a toll booth, you might say." "I don't recall seeing any toll booths on this stretch of I-90, Sarah replied, walking forward with measured steps. She kept her hands visible, her posture relaxed but alert. "Special toll for pretty lady truckers who don't understand how things work around here." Mason's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Remember our conversation about protection? You're in vulture territory now." Sarah stopped about 10 feet away from him. She could see the others spreading out, trying to flank her. Amateur move. They were creating unnecessary distance between themselves, diluting their numerical advantage. "I remember," she said. "I also remember declining your offer." Mason's smile faded. "That's not how this works. Nobody declines. The toll just gets higher when you make us come collect in person." He snapped his fingers, and one of the men tossed him a crowbar. "Now we can do this 2 ways. You pay the fee, let's say 1,000 now, since you made us come out in this weather. Or we start breaking things, beginning with your headlights, then your windshield. After that, maybe your fingers." Sarah sighed as if merely inconvenienced. "How about a third option? You and your friends get back in your vehicles and pretend this never happened. I'll do the same." Mason laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the embankments. "You hear that, boys? Ladies got jokes." The men chuckled dutifully, closing in around her. "Last chance," Sarah said quietly. "No, darling, this is your last chance." Mason took a step toward her, crowbar raised slightly. "On your knees, now." Sarah didn't move. Mason nodded to one of the men behind her. "Show her we mean business, Rick." Sarah heard the footsteps approaching from behind, felt the presence at her back. She remained perfectly still, timing the moment. The kick came exactly as she'd anticipated, a boot to her lower back, meant to drive her to her knees. But Sarah was no longer there. She pivoted at the last second, the kick grazing her side as she spun. Her elbow connected with her attacker's temple, dropping him instantly. The others froze, momentarily surprised by the sudden violence and her unexpected skill. Sarah used that split second to close the distance to Mason, who was still processing what he'd just seen. He swung the crowbar in a wide arc, but Sarah was already inside his guard. She caught his arm, using his own momentum to twist it painfully behind his back. The crowbar clattered to the asphalt. With a quick sweep of her leg, she took Mason's feet out from under him, simultaneously driving him forward. His massive body flew through the air, a trajectory that ended with his face smashing into the windshield of the nearest pickup truck. The glass spider-webbed around the impact point, blood spattering across the cracks. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. Mason slid down the hood, leaving a smear of blood in his wake. He crumpled to the ground, dazed but conscious. The remaining men stood frozen, weapons half raised, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. Sarah retrieved the fallen crowbar, spinning it once in her hand with practiced ease. Her eyes, now cold and predatory, swept over the group. "Like I said," she spoke into the shocked silence, her voice deadly calm. "Third option, walk away, now." One of the younger men found his courage or his stupidity and rushed, her knife drawn. Sarah sidestepped his clumsy attack, the crowbar connecting with his wrist in a sickening crack. The knife fell and she kicked it away, then brought the crowbar down on his knee. He collapsed, screaming. "Anyone else?" Sarah asked, her breathing barely elevated. The remaining men looked at each other uncertainly. Their easy target had transformed into something lethal before their eyes. Mason struggled to his feet, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. His eyes were unfocused, concussed. "What the fuck are you?" he slurred. "Just a trucker," Sarah replied. "One you should have left alone." She backed toward her truck, crowbar still in hand, eyes never leaving the group. No one moved to stop her. They helped Mason into one of the pickup trucks, the injured men limping to the vehicles under their own power. As Sarah climbed back into her cab, Mason's voice called out, "This isn't over, bitch." Sarah started her engine, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'm counting on it," she whispered to herself. She drove around the pickup trucks, now hastily moved to clear a path for her. In her rearview mirror, she watched the iron vultures regrouping Mason, gesticulating wildly despite his injury. She knew what would happen next. They would report to their leadership. Questions would be asked about the woman who fought like a trained operative. Interest would be piqued at higher levels. Exactly as planned. Sarah reached for her satellite phone. It was time to check in with Director Ellis. The operation had officially begun, and the clock was now ticking. Somewhere out there, the ghost might already be receiving word about an unusual encounter on a Montana highway. The storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and ominous, much like the conflict Sarah had just set in motion. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the road ahead for a brief, brilliant moment before plunging it back into growing darkness. Sarah Blackwood, the trucker with a secret past, drove steadily into that darkness, leaving behind the first blood spilled in what promised to be a much larger battle. The hammer tattoo on Mason's neck had indeed triggered a memory. She'd seen it in files connected to one of Whitman's known associates years ago. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to reinforce her suspicions. The ghost was here, operating in the shadows, and Sarah was determined to draw him out once and for all. Even if it meant risking everything she'd built over the past 5 years. Even if it meant becoming the hunter again, instead of the hunted. The storm hit with apocalyptic fury as Sarah pulled into the motel parking lot on the outskirts of Butte. Rain lashed against her windshield in horizontal sheets, driven by winds that rocked even her 18-wheeler. Perfect weather for what she needed to do next. She backed the truck into a space far from the office, positioning it so the security cameras couldn't get a clear view of her activities. The motel was the kind of place that catered to long-haul truckers, basic, cheap, and most importantly, a place where people minded their own business. Sarah grabbed a duffel bag from her sleeper compartment and made a dash for the motel office, the rain soaking her in seconds. The night clerk barely looked up from his magazine, as she paid cash for a room at the far end of the building. No credit card, no questions. Room 17 smelled of industrial cleaner and cigarettes poorly masked by air freshener. Sarah did a quick sweep checking for surveillance devices, mapping entry and exit points, assessing defensive positions. Old habits. The room was clean, just a forgotten place in a forgotten town. She peeled off her wet clothes and stepped into the shower, letting hot water sluice over her body. As steam filled the bathroom, Sarah examined the scar on her abdomen, a puckered circle of flesh where Charles Whitman's bullet had entered 5 years ago. The exit wound on her back was worse, a jagged reminder of how close she'd come to dying that day. Sarah closed her eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. The Chicago warehouse operation. Her partner Michael Chen moving to secure the east entrance. The intelligence had been solid weapons shipment coming in, major players in attendance. The perfect opportunity to take down Whitman after months of tracking him. Then everything had gone wrong. The ambush. The realization that someone had leaked their operation. Michael going down in the first volley of gunfire. Sarah dragging him to cover knowing it was already too late. And then Whitman himself, stepping from the shadows, that cold smile on his face as he raised his weapon. "You should have stayed retired," he'd said just before pulling the trigger. Sarah's eyes snapped open, the phantom pain in her scar pulling her back to the present. She'd survived barely. Whitman had disappeared. The official investigation concluded that a mole in their own agency had compromised the operation, but they never identified who. The case had been quietly closed, the unit disbanded, and Sarah had been given a new identity to disappear into. But now, if Ellis was right, Whitman had resurfaced, and somehow their paths were crossing again. Sarah stepped out of the shower, drying herself vigorously as if to scrub away the memories. She dressed in clean clothes from her duffel, practical, dark-colored items that wouldn't restrict movement. Then she retrieved her satellite phone and placed it on the nightstand. It rang almost immediately. "You missed check-in." Ellis's voice came through without preamble. "I was busy getting ambushed," Sarah replied, stretching out on the bed. "Mason Davis and 6 of his friends tried to shake me down on the highway." A pause. Casualties. "Nothing permanent. Mason's got a concussion and a face full of windshield. One of his boys has a broken wrist and knee. The rest are just nursing bruised egos." Ellis sighed. "So much for the subtle approach." "They made the first move. I responded appropriately." Sarah ran a hand through her damp hair. "Besides, this accelerates the timeline. Word will get back to their leadership." "That was always the risk. If Whitman is connected to the Iron Vultures, he'll recognize your handiwork." "Good," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "I want him to know I'm coming." "This isn't about revenge, Sarah. We need information. Proof of the connection." "The weapons pipeline?" Sarah sat up, irritation flashing across her face, even though Ellis couldn't see it. "I know the mission parameters, but let's not pretend this isn't personal. Whitman killed Michael. He nearly killed me. And he's still out there building his empire. Which is why you need to keep your emotions in check." Ellis's voice softened slightly. "I know what he took from you, but rushing in blindly won't bring Michael back." Sarah closed her eyes briefly at the mention of her former partner's name. More than a partner. They had never crossed professional lines, but the potential had been there, simmering beneath the surface. Now she would never know what might have been. "I'm not rushing in," she said finally. "I'm setting the stage. The Iron Vultures will report to their leadership. Questions will be asked. Interest will be piqued. And when they come for me again, and they will, I'll be ready. Martinez and Jackson are still on standby. After tonight's incident, I strongly recommend no." Sarah cut him off. "Not yet. The more people involved, the more variables, the more risk of another leak." Ellis was silent for a moment. "You still don't trust us." "I trust you, Robert. But someone in the agency fed Whitman information 5 years ago. Until we know who I work alone. At least set up a secure comms link with Martinez and Jackson. If things go sideways, you will need extraction." Sarah considered this. Sophia Martinez had been the team's technology specialist, brilliant with surveillance and communications. Daniel Jackson had been their tactical expert, a former Delta Force operator with an uncanny ability to anticipate enemy movements. Both had been cleared in the investigation of the Chicago incident, but then again, so had everyone else in their unit. "Fine," she conceded. "I'll make contact tomorrow. Send me their secure channels." "Already done." Check your equipment drop. Ellis paused. Be careful, Sarah. Whitman's operation has grown substantially since Chicago. Our intelligence suggests he's supplying weapons to at least 3 major criminal organizations across the western states, which means he's vulnerable. Supply chains can be tracked, disrupted. Exactly. Find the connection between the Iron Vultures and Whitman's main operation. Then we move in with a full tactical team. Sarah heard what Ellis wasn't saying. Once the operation went official, she would be sidelined. A consultant at best, a civilian liability at worst. This window where she operated in the shadows with unofficial sanction was her only chance to face Whitman personally. I'll check in tomorrow, she said. Same time. Watch your back, Blackwood. The line went dead. Sarah set the phone aside and moved to the window, carefully parting the curtains to peer out at the storm-lashed parking lot. Her truck sat undisturbed, rain cascading off its trailer in sheets. No suspicious vehicles, no lurking figures. Not yet, anyway. She returned to the bed and opened her duffel bag, removing a secure laptop. The encryption would give Martinez a run for her money. Sarah powered it up and began compiling what she knew about the Iron Vulture's territory, known associates, suspected operations. Mason Davis featured prominently, his criminal record displaying a pattern of escalating violence. Before joining the Iron Vultures 3 years ago, he'd been a mid-level enforcer for a drug distribution network in Nevada, a network that intelligence had linked to Whitman's organization. Another connection, however, tenuous. Sarah worked through the night, the storm providing a fitting soundtrack to her dark thoughts. By dawn, she had constructed a preliminary map of the Iron Vulture's operations based on news reports, police bulletins, and her own observations. Their territory centered on western Montana, with tendrils extending into Idaho and Wyoming. Their rapid expansion over the past year suggested outside backing, funding, connections, protection from law enforcement, all consistent with Whitman's methodology. As pale morning light filtered through the curtains, Sarah finally allowed herself a few hours of sleep. She lay on top of the covers, Glock within easy reach, her body positioned to face the door. Even in sleep, part of her remained vigilant, senses attuned to the slightest change in her environment. When she woke, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline blue sky and the fresh scent of rain-washed air. Sarah checked her surveillance system remotely. No one had approached her truck during the night. She packed her equipment, erased all traces of her presence from the motel room, and checked out before 9. Back on the road, Sarah maintained her cover as a legitimate trucker. She made her scheduled pickup in Missoula Industrial Parts, bound for Seattle, and continued west on I-90. To all appearances, just another driver making her living on America's highways. But as she drove, Sarah was planning her next move. The Iron Vultures had a clubhouse outside Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, according to police reports. A former roadhouse converted to their headquarters. If she wanted information on their connection to Whitman, that would be the place to find it. First, though, she needed to establish a secure base of operations. Somewhere to stage equipment plan, surveillance, and if necessary, treat injuries. The storage locker in Billings had been Ellis's resource. Now she needed one of her own. Just outside Spokane, Washington, Sarah pulled into a small, family-owned truck stop. The kind of place where the coffee was strong, the food was homemade, and the owners remembered regular customers. She'd been stopping here for 3 years, long enough to build a rapport, but not so long that anyone knew too much about her. Linda, the 60-something owner, greeted her with a warm smile. Sarah, haven't seen you in a couple months. The usual, please, Sarah replied, sliding into her favorite booth, back to the wall, clear view of all entrances. Linda brought over coffee and a slice of huckleberry pie. Passing through or staying a while? Got a few days before my next haul. Thought I might stick around, do some maintenance on the rig. Linda nodded knowingly. Well, if you need a place to park, Joe's still renting out that garage on his property, the one you used last year when you had transmission trouble. Sarah smiled. Linda's husband, Joe, owned several acres outside town, including a large detached garage that had once serviced farm equipment. It was isolated, secure, and perfect for her needs. That's not a bad idea. Is he around? In the back office doing paperwork. I'll tell him you're here. Joe appeared a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag. A Vietnam veteran with a perpetual squint and weathered hands, he had taken a liking to Sarah during her previous stays. Heard you might need the garage, he said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from her. If it's available, just for a few days. Joe studied her face, his eyes shrewd beneath bushy gray eyebrows. Everything okay, Sarah? You seem tense. For a moment, Sarah considered telling him the truth. Joe had seen combat had that same watchfulness she recognized in herself. He would understand the vigilance, the necessary paranoia, but involving civilians was out of the question. Just some trouble on the road, she said instead. Nothing I can't handle, but I could use a quiet place to regroup. Joe nodded slowly. Garage is yours for as long as you need. Same rate as before. Cash, I assume. Cash, Sarah confirmed, reaching for her wallet. Joe waved her off. Pay when you leave. Locks are the same. No one will bother you out there. Sarah thanked him, finishing her pie and coffee in companionable silence. As she was leaving, Joe called after her. Sarah, whatever trouble you're in, be careful. She nodded once, acknowledging his concern without confirming his suspicions. The garage was exactly as she remembered it, spacious enough for her rig, with a small attached room that had once been an office, electricity running, water from a well, and most importantly, privacy. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away with dense woods but providing natural screening. Sarah backed her truck inside, then spent the next 2 hours setting up her base of operations. The office became her command center with surveillance monitors, communications equipment, and weapons within easy reach. She transferred the contents of her truck's hidden compartments to more accessible locations, including body armor, additional weapons, and medical supplies. By late afternoon, she was ready. Sarah activated the secure communication link Ellis had provided using the frequency designated for Sophia Martinez. Songbird calling Raven. Do you copy? Static. Then a familiar voice. This is Raven. Good to hear your voice, Songbird. Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions at the sound of her former teammate's voice. She and Sophia had been close once before Chicago, before everything fell apart. Likewise, Raven. Status holding position in Spokane with Eagle, awaiting your instructions. Eagle Daniel Jackson's call sign. So they were both nearby, as Ellis had indicated. I'm establishing surveillance on a suspected Iron Vulture's location near Coeur d'Alene. No engagement planned at this time. Information gathering only. Understood. We have equipment and resources if needed. Tactical support on standby. Sarah hesitated. I appreciate that, but I'm still operating solo for now. A pause on the other end, then softer, less formal. It's been 5 years, Sarah. You don't have to do everything alone. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Old habits. Bad habits, Sophia corrected gently. Michael wouldn't want... Don't, Sarah cut her off. Please, Sophia, just don't. Another pause. Roger that. We're here when you need us. Eagle sends his regards. Tell him I received them. Songbird out. Sarah set the communication device aside, emotions churning beneath her carefully maintained composure. She hadn't expected Sophia to mention Michael. It was a deliberate move, she realized, a reminder of what happened when Sarah tried to handle things alone. But Sophia hadn't been there in that warehouse, hadn't seen the look in Whitman's eyes as he pulled the trigger, hadn't held Michael as he bled out on that concrete floor. Sarah pushed the memories aside. She had work to do. Night had fallen by the time Sarah approached the Iron Vulture's clubhouse in Coeur d'Alene. She'd left her truck at Joe's garage instead, using a nondescript rental car with tinted windows. Her blonde hair was now concealed beneath a dark wig. Her appearance altered enough that casual observers from the highway incident wouldn't recognize her. The clubhouse sat at the end of a long gravel drive set back from the main road. A former roadhouse, indeed, its weathered wooden exterior illuminated by harsh security lights. The parking lot contained a dozen motorcycles and several trucks, including a black Dodge Ram that Sarah recognized from the highway confrontation. She parked a quarter-mile away in the lot of an abandoned gas station and approached on foot through the surrounding woods. The night vision goggles from her equipment cache turned the darkness into shades of green, allowing her to navigate silently through the underbrush. At the edge of the cleared area surrounding the clubhouse, Sarah found a position with good sight lines to the main building and parking lot. She set up a small but powerful directional microphone, aiming it at the clubhouse's windows, and settled in for surveillance. Through her earpiece, fragments of conversation drifted from inside, crude jokes, arguments over sports, the ambient noise of a group of men drinking and socializing. Nothing of intelligence value yet. Then the front door opened, spilling yellow light onto the gravel lot. Mason Davis emerged, his face sporting an impressive array of cuts and bruises from his encounter with Sarah's improvised windshield facial. He was accompanied by an older man Sarah didn't recognize, tall, lean, with a military bearing, despite his biker attire. The stranger had close-cropped, gray hair and moved with the fluid economy of someone trained in combat. Sarah adjusted her microphone, focusing on their conversation. "Telling you she wasn't just some random trucker," Mason was saying, his voice agitated. "The way she moved, professional, military maybe, or law enforcement." The older man lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating a hard-weathered face. Description again. Blonde, late 30s, pretty but tough looking. About 5'7", athletic build. Wearing some kind of pendant geometric design, looked military. Sarah tensed. The pendant. She'd been careless, leaving it visible during the confrontation. The older man exhaled smoke, his expression thoughtful. "And she just happened to be driving through our territory, convenient. You think she's investigating us? I think coincidences make me nervous." The man tossed his cigarette to the gravel, crushing it under his boot. "Get me the truck's registration details, driver's license info, everything you can find on this Blackwood transport. And Mason, keep this between us for now. No need to alarm the higher-ups until we know what we're dealing with." Mason nodded, touching his bandaged face gingerly. "What if she comes back?" "She will," the older man said with certainty. "People like that always do. And when she does, we'll be ready." They returned inside, leaving Sarah with a sinking feeling in her stomach. Her cover wasn't blown yet, but it was fraying at the edges. The older man, clearly someone with authority in the organization, had picked up on exactly what she'd feared, that her appearance in Iron Vulture's territory wasn't coincidental. She needed to move faster than anticipated. Find the connection to Whitman before they discovered who she really was. Sarah continued her surveillance for another 3 hours, documenting faces, vehicles, patterns of movement. Around midnight, activity at the clubhouse increased as more bikers arrived for what appeared to be a meeting. She couldn't get a clear audio feed from the main room where they gathered, but through a side window she caught glimpses of what looked like a planning session, maps spread on tables, animated discussions, money changing hands. Something big was in the works. As the meeting broke up, Sarah captured images of everyone leaving, using a high-resolution camera with night vision capabilities. She would run facial recognition, later cross-reference with known associates of Whitman. She was about to pack up her surveillance equipment when a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the lot. Unlike the other vehicles, this one screamed money and sophistication, out of place among the motorcycles and battered trucks. The older man from earlier emerged from the clubhouse, standing straighter, more formal, as he waited for the SUV's occupant. When the driver's door opened, Sarah adjusted her camera, focusing on the new arrival. Her blood froze. Even from this distance, even in the poor lighting, she recognized him immediately. Tall and broad-shouldered, moving with lethal grace, his blonde hair now streaked with distinguished silver at the temples. The years had been kind to Charles Whitman, known in intelligence circles as the Ghost, for his ability to operate unseen, leaving no traces. Sarah's finger tightened on the camera's button, capturing image after image as Whitman shook hands with the older biker. They spoke briefly, then moved inside together. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Confirmation. Whitman was directly connected to the Iron Vultures, personally involved in their operations. Whatever they were planning, it was significant enough to warrant his presence. Sarah forced herself to remain in position, monitoring for another hour, though Whitman didn't reemerge. Finally, with the eastern sky beginning to lighten imperceptibly, she packed her equipment and retreated the way she had come. Back in her car, Sarah sat motionless for several minutes, processing what she'd seen. Whitman. Here. After 5 years of wondering if she would ever get another chance to face him, he had appeared almost too easily. It felt wrong somehow, too convenient, unless he knew she was watching, unless this was a performance for her benefit. Sarah started the car and drove back toward Spokane, her mind racing through possibilities. If Whitman recognized her pendant from Mason's description, he might suspect she was in the area. He might even be counting on her emotional response, her desire for revenge, clouding her judgment. She needed to be smarter than that, more calculated. Whitman had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was what made him so dangerous. She couldn't afford to underestimate him again. Back at the garage, Sarah downloaded the surveillance images to her secure laptop and began analysis. The older biker who'd spoken with Mason was identified by facial recognition software as Viktor Kozlov, former Spetsnaz operative turned mercenary. His presence in the Iron Vultures raised even more red flags. This was no ordinary motorcycle gang. They were being shaped into something more dangerous, more disciplined. Sarah established a secure connection and transmitted the images to Ellis, including the confirmation of Whitman's involvement. Then she took a quick shower in the garage's small bathroom, changed clothes, and allowed herself 2 hours of sleep on a cot she'd set up in the office area. She dreamed of Michael, of blood on concrete, of Whitman's cold smile. In the dream, she reached for her weapon, but her hands wouldn't move. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Whitman raised his gun, aiming not at her, but at someone behind her. She turned to see Sophia and Daniel, unaware of the danger. The gunshot woke her. Sarah sat up, breathing hard, her hand already on her Glock. The garage was silent except for the distant call of birds announcing the morning. Just a dream. But the message from her subconscious was clear. Her former teammates were at risk as long as they were involved, however peripherally. Her satellite phone rang Ellis's direct line. "I got your transmission," he said without preamble. Whitman's confirmed presence changes things. "We're mobilizing a full tactical team. I want you to pull back, Sarah. Let us handle this from here." Sarah had expected this. "Not yet. We still don't know what they're planning, what the target is." "That's not your concern anymore. You've done all your part, confirmed the connection. This is now an official bureau operation, which means paperwork approvals, time wasted while Whitman slips away again." Sarah's voice hardened. "He's here now, Robert. Whatever they're planning is happening soon. We may not get another chance." Ellis was silent for a moment. "What are you proposing? Give me 48 hours. I'll infiltrate deeper, find out what they're planning. Then your tactical team can move in with complete intelligence." "It's too risky. If Whitman recognizes you—" "He won't," Sarah insisted. "I'll use a different approach." Another pause. "What kind of approach?" "The Iron Vultures are recruiting. Local news has covered it. They're bringing in new members, expanding operations. They've been approaching independent truckers, offering protection, but really looking for distribution networks." "You're not suggesting—" "I go in posing as a trucker, interested in their offer, someone who's heard they can provide security and extra income. A different identity than Sarah Blackwood." "Absolutely not. It's suicide, Sarah. It's our best chance to learn what they're planning before it happens." Sarah stood pacing the small office. "I'll wear a wire. Martinez can monitor remotely. If anything goes wrong, I'll have an extraction signal." "And what about the fact that Mason Davis has seen your face, that he kicked you in the back and you put him through a windshield? You don't think he'll recognize you?" Sarah had already considered this. "Mason won't be a problem." "Meaning?" "Meaning I'll ensure he's not in a position to identify me." Ellis sighed heavily. "I don't like this, Sarah. It's unnecessarily risky." "Life is risky, Robert. Michael knew that. I know that." A long silence. 24 hours, Ellis finally said. "Not a minute more. And you maintain constant communication with Martinez. The moment she loses your signal, we move in with everything we've got." "Understood." "Sarah," Ellis's voice softened, "I know what Whitman took from you, but don't let revenge cloud your judgment. The mission is to stop whatever they're planning, not to settle personal scores." "I know my job," Sarah replied coolly. "See that you remember it." 24 hours. The line went dead. Sarah set the phone down and moved to her equipment cache. If she was going to infiltrate the Iron Vultures, she needed a different appearance, different credentials, a compelling cover story, and she needed to deal with Mason Davis. The Greyhound bus station in Coeur d'Alene was nearly empty at mid-morning, just a few travelers dozing on plastic seats or staring at their phones. No one paid attention to the woman who entered, average height, unremarkable brown hair, cut in a practical bob, wearing jeans boots and a leather jacket that had seen better days. Large sunglasses covered much of her face, and she moved with the slight wariness of someone in an unfamiliar place. The transformation from Sarah Blackwood to Jamie Carter had been thorough. The wig was high quality, the colored contacts changing her blue eyes to brown, subtle makeup, altering the appearance of her cheekbones and jawline. The fingerprint-resistant gloves she wore looked like ordinary driving gloves, and the pendant that might have identified her was safely stowed in her equipment cache back at the garage. "Sarah now," Jamie purchased a cup of mediocre coffee from the vending machine and took a seat with a clear view of the entrance. The wire she wore was state-of-the-art, virtually undetectable unless someone was specifically looking for it. Sophia Martinez was monitoring from a secure location the connection tested and confirmed before Sarah had left the garage. Audio is clear. Sophia's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. Eagle is in position outside as backup. Sarah gave no visible acknowledgement. Part of her was irritated that Ellis had insisted on Daniel Jackson being nearby, but another part was grudgingly grateful. This operation was risky, especially with her accelerated timeline. According to her intelligence, the Iron Vultures used the bus station as a recruiting ground, approaching travelers who matched certain profiles, people down on their luck looking for work unlikely to have strong community ties. Today, she would make sure they noticed her. She didn't have to wait long. At precisely 10:15 a.m., a man entered the station, mid-30s muscular build, the Iron Vultures logo visible on his leather vest. Not Mason, thankfully, but someone she recognized from her surveillance photos. A lower-ranking member named Tyler Walsh, former military dishonorable discharge for assault, now apparently tasked with recruitment. Sarah slumped slightly in her seat, adopting the posture of someone defeated by circumstances. She made a show of counting the meager cash in her wallet, sighing audibly. Walsh noticed her as she'd intended. He purchased his own coffee and casually took a seat nearby, not directly approaching, but close enough to initiate conversation. "Bus delayed?" he asked after a few minutes of calculated silence. Sarah glanced up, then away quickly, as if uncomfortable with the tension. "Something like that." "Heading out or coming in?" "Out, hopefully." She sipped her coffee, grimacing at the taste. "If I can afford the ticket." Walsh leaned forward slightly, interest piqued. "Rough times." Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "You could say that. Lost my trucking job when the company downsized. Been trying to find work for 3 weeks. You're a trucker." Walsh made no attempt to hide his increased interest. 10 years experience, Class A CDL, clean record. Sarah sighed. "Not that it's helping much. The big companies aren't hiring and the independent operators want years of solo experience, which I don't have." Walsh nodded sympathetically. "Tough break. This economy's brutal on working folks." He hesitated as if making a decision, then extended his hand. "Tyler Walsh?" Sarah shook at her grip firm, but not challenging. "Jamie Carter." "You know, Jamie, I might know some people looking for drivers, especially experienced ones with clean records." "What kind of people?" Sarah injected just the right amount of wariness and desperate hope into her voice. Walsh gestured to his vest. "I'm with the Iron Vultures, MC. We've got connections throughout the Northwest. Transportation businesses, security companies. Not all the usual channels, if you catch my meaning, but solid work. Good pay." Sarah pretended to consider this conflict playing across her face. "I've heard of you guys. You're all over the news lately." "Don't believe everything you hear," Walsh said with a practiced smile. "We're just businessmen looking out for our community. The cops give us a hard time because we don't play by their rules." "What kind of driving jobs are we talking about?" Walsh glanced around the nearly empty bus station, then lowered his voice. "Various types, regular freight, sometimes special cargo. The pay is excellent, no taxes, but it requires discretion and loyalty." "Special cargo," Sarah repeated flatly. "You mean illegal?" Walsh shrugged. "I mean profitable and well protected. Nobody messes with our drivers." Sarah made a show of internal struggle, then sighed deeply. "I'm not in a position to be picky right now, but I don't have a rig of my own anymore." "That can be arranged. We have several trucks available for the right drivers." Walsh reached into his vest pocket and produced a business card. "We're having a gathering tonight, sort of a recruitment event. Why don't you come by, meet some of the guys, hear the full offer?" Sarah took the card, examining it carefully. The address was different from the clubhouse she'd surveilled, a bar called the Broken Spoke about 5 miles outside town. "I don't know." "Just come listen," Walsh urged. "No commitment. Free food, free drinks. If you don't like what you hear, you walk away, no hard feelings. But I think you'll be interested in what we can offer a professional driver like yourself." Sarah tucked the card into her pocket. "Maybe. What time?" 8 o'clock. Ask for me at the door." Walsh stood. "Hope to see you there, Jamie. Could be the fresh start you need." After he left, Sarah remained in the bus station for another 20 minutes, maintaining her cover in case she was being observed. Then she purchased a ticket she had no intention of using and exited to the street. Target acquired, she murmured, knowing Sophia would pick it up through the wire. Invitation received to recruitment event tonight at the Broken Spoke. Copy that, Sophia's voice came through her earpiece. Running background on the location now. Eagle will advance scout the venue. Sarah walked 3 blocks to where she'd parked her rental car, constantly scanning for surveillance. The Iron Vultures might be more sophisticated than the average motorcycle gang, but they weren't counterintelligence professionals. If she was being followed, she would spot it. Back at the garage, Sarah reviewed her plan with Sophia and Daniel via secure video link. Daniel's face appeared on her laptop screen, older than she remembered, new lines around his eyes and mouth, but still with that steady gaze that had always made her feel secure in the field. The Broken Spoke is a known Iron Vultures hangout, he reported. I did a drive-by. One main entrance, rear exit through the kitchen windows too small to provide viable escape routes. Parking lot is open exposed. Limited cover. Security, Sarah asked? Minimal visible measures. No cameras outside, probably basic surveillance inside. They're not expecting trouble at a recruitment event. They want to appear legitimate, welcoming. Sophia's face appeared in a second window on the screen. I've modified your wire to include a panic button. Press it 3 times in succession, and both Eagle and I will know you need immediate extraction. Sarah nodded. What about Mason Davis? Any sign of him during your reconnaissance? Daniel shook his head. Negative. But my sources say he's still in the area, not hospitalized despite what you did to his face. That complicates things. Sarah frowned. If he's at this event tonight, he'll recognize me, disguise or no disguise. Then we need to ensure he's not there, Sophia said simply. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Sophia smiled, a sharp expression that reminded Sarah why she'd been such an effective operative. I think it's time Mason Davis had an unfortunate accident that requires medical attention. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to keep him occupied elsewhere. I can arrange that, Daniel offered. I've identified his residence. A simple brake line issue on his motorcycle should do the trick. Sarah felt a twinge of concern. This was escalating beyond intelligence gathering, moving into active interference. But they were right. Mason's presence at the recruitment event would doom the operation before it began. Do it, she decided, but minimal harm. We're not assassins. Daniel nodded solemnly. Understood. I'll ensure he survives with nothing worse than a few more bruises to match the ones you already gave him. They finalized the details of the evening's operation. Sarah would attend the recruitment event as Jamie Carter gathered information about the Iron Vulture's plans and potentially secure a position as a driver for their organization. Sophia would monitor remotely while Daniel maintained position outside the bar as emergency backup. And if Whitman is there, Sophia asked the question they had all been avoiding. Sarah's expression hardened. I maintain my cover. The mission comes first. Sarah, Daniel began, I know what's at stake. She cut him off. I won't compromise the operation for personal reasons. Her former teammates exchanged glances but didn't press the issue. They knew her too well to believe her completely, but they also respected her professionalism. As the video call ended, Sarah checked her watch. 6 hours until the meeting at the Broken Spoke. Time to make final preparations. She laid out her equipment on the garage's workbench. The wire and earpiece already tested a small ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors, a concealed pouch containing fast-acting sedative capsules that could be slipped into a drink if necessary. She wouldn't carry her Glock, too risky if she was searched, but Daniel would have a weapon ready for her if extraction became necessary. Sarah studied her reflection in a small mirror, practicing expressions that belonged to Jamie Carter rather than Sarah Blackwood. Jamie was desperate, a bit broken by circumstances, willing to cross lines that Sarah would never approach. Jamie's smile was less confident, her posture less commanding. Jamie Carter, she said aloud, testing the name in her mouth, finding the character's voice slightly higher pitched than her own, with a hint of a Midwestern accent. Her satellite phone rang. Ellis again. Status? He asked without greeting. Progressing as planned. I've secured an invitation to a recruitment event tonight. Mason Davis will be temporarily removed as a potential threat to my cover. Removed how? Ellis's voice sharpened. Nothing permanent, just ensuring he's elsewhere during the operation. A sigh. This is exactly the kind of operational escalation I was concerned about, Sarah. You're moving from passive intelligence gathering to active interference. It's necessary for the mission, Sarah insisted, and time-sensitive, given your 24-hour deadline, which I'm already regretting giving you. Ellis paused. The tactical team is assembled and on standby in Spokane. The moment you have actionable intelligence on the Iron Vulture's plans, or if anything goes wrong, they move in. Understood. And Sarah, if Whitman is present tonight, you maintain your cover. No engagement. Are we clear? Sarah's jaw tightened. Crystal clear. I mean it. I know what he did to Michael, what he did to you. But this operation is bigger than personal vendettas. We need to shut down this weapons pipeline. Whitman will face justice through proper channels. I said I understand, Sarah replied, her voice cold. Ellis was silent for a moment. Check in before you enter the venue tonight and immediately after you exit. Any delay and I send in the tactical team. Acknowledged. The call ended, leaving Sarah with a familiar, hollow feeling. Ellis meant well, but he'd always been an administrator first, a field agent second. He didn't truly understand what it was like to look into the eyes of someone who had taken everything from you, to feel the weight of a partner's blood on your hands. Sarah pushed these thoughts aside. She needed to focus on becoming Jamie Carter now, the desperate trucker looking for work, not the agent seeking revenge. The afternoon passed slowly as Sarah finalized preparations. Daniel reported success in his mission. Mason's motorcycle had suffered a convenient brake malfunction, resulting in a minor crash and a trip to the emergency room with a broken arm. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to ensure he wouldn't be present at the recruitment event. By 7:30, Sarah was parked a block away from the broken spoke, making her final check-in with Sophia. Wire is functioning perfectly, Sophia confirmed. Audio is clear. Eagle is in position with line of sight to the main entrance. And the panic signal, test it now. Sarah pressed the concealed button on what appeared to be a simple bracelet 3 times in rapid succession. Confirmed receipt, Sophia said immediately. Extraction team would be mobilized in a real scenario. Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself. All right, I'm going in. Maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary. I'll establish regular bathroom breaks for updates if needed. Understood. Be careful, Sarah. Always am. Sarah exited the car and walked a short distance to the bar. Her gait, now Jamie Carter's, slightly less confident to shoulders, a bit more hunched, the walk of someone who expected life to disappoint her. The broken spoke was a weathered single-story building with neon beer signs glowing in the windows. Motorcycles dominated the parking lot, interspersed with pickup trucks and a few sedans. Music thumped from inside classic rock, loud enough to be heard from the street. A burly man stood by the entrance, checking IDs and patting down new arrivals. Sarah approached him directly. I'm here to see Tyler Walsh, she said, injecting a note of uncertainty into Jamie Carter's voice. He's expecting me. The man looked her over, assessing. Jamie Carter. He nodded and spoke into a radio clipped into his vest. After a moment, he gestured toward the door. Arms out. Standard pat-down. Sarah complied, keeping her expression neutral as his hands moved efficiently but respectfully over her clothing, checking for weapons. The ceramic knife in her boot and the wire beneath her clothing went undetected as she'd expected. You're clear. Walsh is at the bar. Inside, the broken spoke was hazy with cigarette smoke, despite state laws against indoor smoking. The clientele was predominantly male, most sporting some variation of the Iron Vulture's colors. A few women were present, clinging to members' arms or serving drinks. Tyler Walsh spotted her from his position at the bar and waved her over, a welcoming smile on his face. Jamie, glad you made it. Sarah returned the smile tentatively. Still not sure what I'm doing here, but figured it couldn't hurt to listen. Smart woman, what are you drinking? Beer's fine. Walsh signaled the bartender, who delivered 2 bottles promptly. He clinked his against hers. To new opportunities. Sarah took a small sip, careful to limit her alcohol intake. So what exactly are these opportunities you mentioned? Let's talk somewhere quieter. Walsh led her to a booth in the corner, away from the worst of the noise. As they sat, Sarah noted that while the booth offered privacy for conversation, it also limited her exit options. Calculated choice on Walsh's part. Here's the situation. Walsh began, leaning forward. The Iron Vultures aren't just a motorcycle club. We're a business organization with diverse interests throughout the Northwest. Transportation is a major component of our operation. Meaning smuggling, Sarah said bluntly, playing her role. Walsh smiled, appreciating her directness. Among other things, we move products that various parties want moved discreetly, sometimes across state lines, sometimes across international borders. The profit margins are substantial, and the risks minimal with our protection. Our drivers are well compensated for those risks, starting at $5,000 per run depending on cargo and distance. Sarah raised her eyebrows, allowing Jamie Carter's desperation to show. That's significant money. It is, but we don't work with just anyone. We need people who understand discretion, who can follow instructions precisely, who don't ask unnecessary questions. And if there's trouble, police, border patrol. Walsh's smile tightened slightly. Our routes are carefully planned to avoid official attention, but if issues arise, we have resources to handle them. Legal representation, bail money, whatever's needed, we take care of our own. The conversation continued, Walsh gradually revealing more details about the operation, regular routes into Canada and down to Mexico's specialized cargo that required careful handling, the organizational structure that protected those at the top from direct connection to illegal activities. Sarah played her role perfectly, asking the questions a desperate trucker would ask, showing appropriate concern about risks while making it clear that financial necessity was overriding her better judgment. So what do you think? Walsh asked finally. Interested in a trial run, something small to start, see how you handle it. Sarah hesitated deliberately. Maybe. When would this happen? We've got something coming up in 3 days. Short run, good pay, minimal risk. Perfect for a first-timer. What's the cargo? Walsh shook his head. That's need to know until you're confirmed. But I can tell you it's not drugs. We leave that business to others. Sarah took another small sip of her beer, mind racing. 3 days. Whatever the Iron Vultures in Whitman were planning, it was happening soon. This was the intelligence she needed. I'd need to know more before committing, she said cautiously. Of course. That's why you're here tonight, to meet some of the people you'd be working with, get comfortable with the organization. As if on cue, a tall figure approached their booth, Viktor Kozlov, the former Spetsnaz operative Sarah had observed with Whitman. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral, curious. Tyler, Kozlov acknowledged with a nod. This our potential new driver. Victor, meet Jamie Carter, 10 years experience, clean record, currently between opportunities. Kozlov extended his hand, his gaze assessing her with professional thoroughness. Sarah shook it, careful to maintain Jamie Carter's demeanor, impressed by his obvious authority, but not intimidated. You look familiar, Kozlov said suddenly, his eyes narrowing slightly. Have we met before? Sarah's heart rate spiked, but she kept her expression puzzled. I don't think so. I'm pretty new to this area. Kozlov continued, studying her face. Perhaps not. I meet many people in this business. He turned to Walsh. The boss wants to see any potential drivers personally. Bring her to the back room. Walsh nodded, standing. Come on, Jamie. This is a good sign the big man doesn't meet everyone. Sarah followed them through the crowded bar toward a door marked private at the rear of the building. Every instinct screamed caution. The boss could mean many things, the local Iron Vultures leader, or possibly Whitman himself. If it was the latter, her cover would be blown instantly. She subtly pressed the panic button on her bracelet once, not the full extraction signal, but a warning to Sophia and Daniel that the situation was escalating. Beyond the door was a short hallway leading to what had once been the bar's office. Walsh knocked, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Sir, this is Jamie Carter, the driver I mentioned. Sarah stepped into the room, bracing herself for whatever or whoever awaited her. A man sat behind a desk, his face partially shadowed by the room's poor lighting. Not Whitman, thankfully. This man was older, heavier, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades on the road. He wore the Iron Vulture's colors, but his vest was more elaborate than the others, marking him as someone of significant rank. Ms. Carter, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. I'm Frank Mercer. They call me the Colonel. I understand you're interested in driving for our organization. Sarah recognized the name from her intelligence files. Frank the Colonel Mercer, former military, dishonorable discharge for selling equipment on the black market, suspected of involvement in weapons trafficking across multiple states. Direct connection to Whitman unconfirmed, but highly probable. This was exactly the break she needed. Yes, sir, she replied, infusing Jamie Carter's voice with the perfect mix of respect and desperation. If the terms are as Mr. Walsh described them, Mercer gestured to a chair across from his desk. Have a seat. Let's talk about your qualifications. As Sarah sat down mentally preparing for the most important performance of her life, she knew she was getting close to the information Ellis needed. The details of the Iron Vulture's upcoming operation, the confirmation of Whitman's involvement, the pipeline they had established for moving weapons across state lines. What she didn't know was that 5 miles away, Mason Davis had left the emergency room against medical advice. His broken arm in a cast, his face contorted with rage as he studied a photograph on his phone. A surveillance image from the bus station that morning showing Jamie Carter entering the building. An image that a facial recognition program more sophisticated than anything a motorcycle gang should have had access to had just matched to an old FBI personnel file for Special Agent Sarah Blackwood. Colonel Frank Mercer studied Sarah with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. His weathered face remained expressionless as he flipped through a file containing Jamie Carter's falsified credentials, a masterpiece of deception created by Sophia Martinez using compromised DMV databases and fabricated employment records. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Mercer noted, scanning her supposed driving history. You've covered a lot of ground. The road's been my home for a decade, Sarah replied in Jamie Carter's voice. I go where the work takes me. Mercer nodded slowly, and now the work's dried up. Convenient timing. Sarah detected the faint note of suspicion. She leaned forward, allowing Jamie's desperation to show. Look, I'm not going to pretend this was my first choice. I've always kept my nose clean, stayed on the right side of the law. But 3 months behind on rent truck, repossessed, no prospects. A person gets practical real fast. Kozlov remained by the door, arms crossed, eyes never leaving her face. His earlier comment about her looking familiar still hung in the air, an unresolved threat. You understand what we're offering isn't just a job, Mercer continued. It's membership in an organization, a family with obligations and expectations. Tyler explained the basics, Sarah said cautiously. Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. Did he now? And what exactly did Tyler explain? A test, Sarah chose her words carefully, that you move specialized cargo across state lines, that discretion is paramount, that the pay reflects the risk, and that the organization protects its own. And you're comfortable with that arrangement. Comfortable doesn't enter into it, Sarah replied, an edge of bitterness in her voice. I need the money. I need to rebuild. If that means bending some rules, so be it. Mercer exchanged a glance with Kozlov, some unspoken communication passing between them. Sarah maintained Jamie Carter's slightly nervous posture while mentally calculating escape routes if things went sideways. We have a shipment moving in 3 days, Mercer said finally. Seattle to Boise. Not our usual route, but circumstances have required adjustments. The cargo is high value, high risk. We need reliable drivers. What kind of cargo? The kind that pays $15,000 for a one-day drive. Sarah raised her eyebrows, letting Jamie Carter's shock register. That's substantial. It is, and it comes with substantial expectations. No detours, no inspections, no questions. And no law enforcement, Sarah added knowingly. Mercer smiled coldly. Precisely. We have arrangements in place to avoid official attention, but in the unlikely event of complications, there are protocols. You'll be briefed if you are selected. As Sarah knew she was getting close to the intelligence Ellis needed, the details of a major weapons shipment based on the context and the unusually high payment. But she needed more specific times, locations, the nature of the cargo. I can handle it, she said with a conviction. I just need to know when and where. Mercer closed the file, studying her face. You'll receive that information only if you're approved. We have one more step in our vetting process. The office door opened without a knock. A tall figure entered, silhouetted against the hallway light. Sorry I'm late, said a chillingly familiar voice. Had a situation that required attention. Sarah's blood froze. Charles Whitman, the ghost, the man who had killed her partner and nearly killed her 5 years ago, stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and imposing with sharp features and cold blue eyes that seemed to see through every deception. His blonde hair now had distinguished streaks of silver at the temples, and he wore an expensive suit rather than tactical gear, but otherwise time had left him unchanged. Sarah kept her expression neutral through sheer force of will, grateful for the colored contacts wig and subtle makeup alterations that changed her appearance. Would it be enough? Whitman had seen her up close in Chicago, had looked into her eyes as he pulled the trigger. "This is our potential new driver," Whitman asked, moving behind Mercer's desk with the easy confidence of someone in charge. "Jamie Carter," Mercer confirmed, "experienced, desperate, and according to Tyler, skilled enough for our purposes." Whitman turned his gaze on Sarah, and she felt a chill run through her body. His eyes were evaluating, calculating, seeing through layers. She matched his gaze as Jamie Carter would nervously but not submissively. "Ms. Carter," Whitman said, extending his hand, "Charles Wilson. I provide consulting services for Mr. Mercer's organization." Sarah rose and shook his hand, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to attack, to exact revenge for Michael's death. His grip was firm, professional, betraying nothing of the killer she knew him to be. "Nice to meet you," she managed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Whitman held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he released it, turning to Mercer. "Has she been briefed on the Seattle operation?" "Just the basics. Payment, general route. No specifics yet." "Good." Whitman circled the desk, leaning against it casually, but Sarah recognized the predatory positioning between her and the door controlling the space. "Tell me, Ms. Carter, have you ever handled security-sensitive cargo before?" "Depends on your definition," Sarah replied carefully. "I've moved valuables, electronics, pharmaceuticals. Things that required special handling and discretion. But nothing that would violate federal firearms statutes. A trap, but an expected one." Sarah allowed Jamie Carter's nervousness to show. "Not knowingly, but I'm not naive about what $15,000 for a day's drive might entail." Whitman smiled slightly. Honesty. Refreshing. He glanced at Mercer. "I think Ms. Carter might be suitable for our purposes, with the appropriate precautions." Mercer nodded, understanding some unspoken instruction. "We'll arrange a test run tomorrow. Something small, low risk, to assess compatibility." "I'm available," Sarah said, sensing an opportunity to secure more intelligence. "Excellent." Whitman's gaze lingered on her face. "There's something familiar about you, Ms. Carter. Have we crossed paths before?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression puzzled. "I don't think so. I'd remember meeting someone like you." A slight flattery, a touch of attraction, part of Jamie Carter's persona, a desperate woman who might use whatever advantages came her way. Whitman seemed to accept this, though something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Perhaps you remind me of someone." "No matter." He turned to Kozlov. "Victor, please escort Miss Carter out and provide her with the details for tomorrow's test. The usual protocols." Kozlov nodded, opening the door. "This way." Sarah stood, maintaining Jamie Carter's slightly subservient posture. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mercer. Mr. Wilson." Whitman inclined his head, watching her intently as she exited. The weight of his gaze felt like a physical pressure between her shoulder blades. In the hallway, Kozlov handed her a burner phone. "You'll receive a text at 0900 tomorrow with coordinates for a pickup. Be punctual. Leave your personal phone at home." "What will I be moving?" "Something small, a test of trust." Kozlov's eyes narrowed slightly. "Word of advice, the Colonel trusts Tyler's judgment, but Mr. Wilson is more cautious. Don't give him reasons to doubt you." Sarah nodded, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Understood." They walked back through the bar, which had grown more crowded during her meeting. Sarah kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with the other patrons. Her mind was racing, processing the encounter with Whitman. He hadn't recognized her immediately, but his comment about her looking familiar was concerning. How long would her disguise hold? At the entrance, Kozlov stopped her with a hand on her arm. "One more thing. We've had some security concerns recently. Someone watching our operations." His grip tightened slightly. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Miss Carter?" Sarah met his gaze evenly. "How would I? I just got to town." Kozlov studied her face for a long moment, then released her arm. "Indeed, safe travels tonight." The warning was clear. They were suspicious, vigilant. Her margin for error was narrowing by the minute. Outside, Sarah walked calmly to her car, fighting the urge to look over her shoulder. Only when she was blocks away did she finally speak, knowing Sophia would be listening through the wire. "Did you get all that?" "Every word," Sophia confirmed in her earpiece. Whitman identified as Charles Wilson. Confirmation of a major shipment in 3 days Seattle to Boise, and a test run tomorrow. "The shipment has to be weapons," Sarah said, turning onto a quiet residential street to ensure she wasn't being followed. "The payment amount and the security concerns Whitman's direct involvement, it all fits." "Ellis wants you to pull out now," Sophia replied. "We have enough to justify a full operation. The tactical team can take over." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Not yet. The test run tomorrow is our chance to get specifics, exact route, drop points, contacts in Boise. If we move now, Whitman disappears again." "Sarah," Sophia's voice carried a warning, "you're too close to this. Ellis is concerned you're putting revenge ahead of the mission." "I'm putting thoroughness ahead of bureaucratic caution," Sarah countered. "One more day, one test run, then we'll have everything we need to shut down the entire operation." Silence on the other end. Then, "Ellis is on the line. He wants to speak with you directly." Sarah sighed. "Put him through." Ellis's voice came over the secure channel, tense and authoritative. "Blackwood, you've done exemplary work, but your 24 hours are nearly up, and you've already had direct contact with the Whitman. The risk is unacceptable." "With respect, sir, we're on the verge of uncovering a major weapons trafficking operation. The test run tomorrow will give us the final pieces, specific routes, contacts, the full network." "And what if Whitman realizes who you are? What if he's already suspicious and is setting a trap with this test run?" Sarah had considered this possibility. "Then the tactical team can move in. I'll have the panic button, and Martinez and Jackson will be monitoring." "It's unnecessary risk," Ellis insisted. "We have enough to justify a major operation targeting the Iron Vultures. We can sweep up Mercer Kozlov and the rest of the leadership." "But not Whitman," Sarah said pointedly. "He's too careful, too insulated. He'll disappear the moment he senses trouble, just like Chicago. And we'll spend another 5 years trying to find him again." Ellis was silent for a moment. "This feels personal, Sarah." "It is personal," she admitted, "but that doesn't mean it's not also the right tactical decision. One more day, one test run, then you get everything we need to take down not just the Iron Vultures, but Whitman's entire operation." Another long pause. 12 hours, Ellis finally said. "Complete the test run, gather the intelligence, then you're out and the tactical team moves in. No exceptions, no extensions. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear. And Sarah, if at any point Whitman shows signs of recognizing you, you hit that panic button immediately. Your life is worth more than this operation." The line went dead before she could respond. Sarah drove in silence for several minutes, processing the conversation. Ellis was right about the risk, but also wrong about her motivations. Yes, she wanted revenge for Michael for the bullet Whitman had put through her body. But more than that, she wanted to finish what they'd started 5 years ago, to remove a dangerous weapons trafficker from the equation permanently. She checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of Coeur d'Alene, not returning to Joe's garage in case she was being followed. After a secure check-in with Sophia confirming her location, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly. The room was basic but clean, similar to countless others she'd stayed in during her years with the Bureau. Sarah checked for surveillance devices, secured the perimeter, and positioned furniture to provide tactical advantages if needed. Then she removed her wig and contacts, grateful to shed Jamie Carter's persona temporarily. In the bathroom mirror, Sarah Blackwood's face stared back at her, blue eyes hard with determination, blonde hair now free from the confining wig. The face of a woman who had lost everything once and refused to lose again. She touched the scar on her abdomen gently, a physical reminder of unfinished business. Tomorrow might be her only chance to complete that business, to ensure Whitman faced justice for Michael's death, for her own near death, for the countless lives destroyed by the weapons he trafficked. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her mind replaying the encounter with Whitman, analyzing every word, every gesture for signs that he had recognized her. By dawn, Sarah was already awake, preparing for the day ahead. She reapplied Jamie Carter's identity carefully: the wig, the contacts, the subtle makeup alterations, the slightly different posture and speaking patterns. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the burner phone buzzed with a text message. coordinates for a location 30 miles east, with instructions to be there at 11 Amaru a.m. Sarah memorized the location, then contacted Sophia. Coordinates received for the test run, remote area national forest land, suggest they're being cautious choosing isolated territory. I've got the location, Sophia confirmed. Satellite imagery shows a fire access road, minimal civilian traffic. Good spot for an exchange. Or an ambush, Sarah noted grimly. Eagle will be in position with eyes on the meeting point. Tactical team on standby 20 minutes out if needed. Sarah nodded, though Sophia couldn't see it. I'm heading out. Maintain communications blackout unless emergency protocols are activated. She drove cautiously to the designated location, constantly scanning for surveillance or pursuit. The coordinates led to a gravel turnout off a Forest Service road, isolated with good visibility in all directions, but also with limited escape routes. Sarah parked and waited, engine running, senses heightened. At exactly 11 a.m., a black SUV appeared on the forest road, approaching slowly. It pulled alongside her rental car, and the passenger window lowered to reveal Tyler Walsh. Right on time, he said approvingly. Follow us. Stay close. Sarah nodded, putting her car in gear as the SUV pulled ahead. They drove deeper into the forest, eventually turning onto a narrower access road that wound through dense pines. After about 15 minutes, they emerged into a small clearing where a nondescript panel van was parked. Viktor Kozlov stood beside the van, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Sarah parked and exited her vehicle, approaching with Jamie Carter's cautious demeanor. Good morning, she greeted them. Kozlov nodded curtly. Your test is simple. Drive this van to Spokane, park it in the designated location, walk away. Don't look inside, don't deviate from the route. He handed her a sealed envelope. GPS coordinates are in here, along with a key and $5,000. Half now, half upon successful completion. Sarah took the envelope, peeking inside to confirm its contents. Seems straightforward enough. It is, Walsh agreed. Consider it a mutual trust-building exercise. Any special handling instructions? Sarah asked, walking around the van to assess it visually. None. Drive normally, obey traffic laws. If stopped by law enforcement for any reason, you know nothing about us. You're delivering office supplies for a company whose name is on the rental agreement in the glove compartment. Sarah nodded. Simple enough and consistent with standard trafficking methodology, using unwitting or semi-witting drivers for lower-risk shipments while reserving trusted personnel for the high-value cargo. When do I get details on the Seattle job? She asked, keeping her tone professional. Complete this successfully and we'll talk, Kozlov replied. Wilson was quite specific. You need to prove yourself first. The mention of Whitman sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she maintained her composure. Fair enough. I'll call the number when the delivery is complete. We'll contact you, Walsh said, handing her the van keys. And Jamie, don't get curious about what you're delivering. It wouldn't end well. The warning was clear. Sarah accepted the keys with a nod. Understood. See you in a few hours. As Walsh and Kozlov returned to their SUV, Sarah climbed into the van. The vehicle was older but well-maintained, with nothing visibly suspicious about its exterior. Inside, the cargo area was separated from the cabin by a solid partition, unusual for a standard delivery van. Sarah started the engine and followed the SUV back to the main forest road, where they flashed their lights and turned in the opposite direction, leaving her alone. She checked the GPS coordinates in the envelope, a shopping center parking lot in Spokane, approximately 90 minutes away. Once the SUV was out of sight, Sarah spoke quietly, knowing Sophia would be monitoring. Package received. Delivering van to Spokane. Unknown contents, but likely a test shipment of weapons or related materials. Copy that, Sophia replied in her earpiece. Eagle is paralleling your route at a safe distance. Forensics team standing by at the drop point to examine the van once you clear the area. Acknowledged. Sarah drove precisely at the speed limit, maintaining her cover as a professional driver making a routine delivery. Part of her was tempted to examine the cargo to gather direct evidence of what the Iron Vultures were trafficking, but she resisted. The van might be under surveillance, and compromising her cover now would jeopardize the entire operation. The drive to Spokane was uneventful, the van handling normally with no indication of what might be in its cargo area. Sarah remained vigilant, checking regularly for signs of surveillance, but detected nothing suspicious. She arrived at the designated parking lot shortly after 1:00 p.m. Following instructions, Sarah parked the van in a section away from the main shopping area, locked it, and walked away without looking back. She had placed a tiny tracker underneath the van's bumper during a brief stop for gas insurance, that the FBI could locate it later if necessary. Sarah caught a taxi back to her motel, maintaining communication silence until she was certain she wasn't being followed. Only when she was safely in her room did she contact Sophia again. Delivery complete. Clean drop, no complications. Excellent, Sophia replied. Ellis is pleased. The forensics team will move in once the van is retrieved by the Iron Vulture's people. With luck, we'll have confirmation of what they're trafficking by tonight. Any sign of surveillance during the operation? Negative. You appear to have passed their test. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, tension draining from her shoulders. Now we wait for them to contact me about the Seattle operation. Remember the agreement, Sophia cautioned. Once we have the details of the Seattle-Boise shipment, you're out and the tactical team takes over. I remember. Hours passed with no contact from the Iron Vultures. Sarah remained in her motel room, maintaining Jamie Carter's identity in case of unexpected visitors. By evening, the burner phone remained silent. Something's wrong, she told Sophia during their scheduled check-in. They should have made contact by now. The van was retrieved 2 hours after you dropped it, Sophia reported. Our team is analyzing trace evidence, but preliminary findings confirm weapons components, specialized parts likely for assault rifles. The operation is legitimate. Then why haven't they contacted me? Sarah paced the small room. Did I miss something? Was I made? No indication of that. Maybe they're just being cautious. Sarah wasn't convinced. Her instincts, honed through years of undercover work, were signaling danger. I'm going to do a recon pass by the broken spoke, see if there's unusual activity. That's not advisable, Sophia warned. If they're suspicious, you could be walking into a trap, or they could be accelerating their timeline because of external pressure. We need to know. Before Sophia could object further, Sarah had already begun reapplying Jamie Carter's disguise. 20 minutes later, she was driving past the broken spoke, maintaining a casual pace while scanning the parking lot. The bar appeared busier than normal, with more vehicles than the previous night. As she passed, Sarah noted several unfamiliar faces standing guard outside, not regular Iron Vultures members, but harder men with the unmistakable bearing of professional security. Sarah circled the block and parked in a position with a clear view of the bar's entrance. Something was definitely happening. The increased security, the unusual activity midweek, it suggested preparation for a significant event. Her burner phone finally buzzed at 9:43 p.m. A text message from an unknown number. Job requirements changed. Meeting tomorrow. 0600, same coordinates as today. Come alone. Sarah's instincts flared in warning. The abrupt timeline changed the unusual phrasing. It felt wrong. Martinez, are you getting this? She murmured. Affirmative, Sophia replied. It's inconsistent with their previous communication pattern. They're either accelerating the schedule or setting a trap. Or both. Ellis wants you to withdraw. We have enough to move on the Iron Vultures now. Sarah watched as 2 more SUVs pulled into the bar's parking lot. Men in tactical gear emerged, moving with military precision. Not bikers, professionals. Something major is happening, she observed. They're mobilizing. If we move now, we might miss the bigger picture. Sarah, this is beyond your 24-hour window. Ellis is ordering you to stand down. But Sarah wasn't listening. A familiar figure had just emerged from the bar, Charles Whitman, flanked by Kozlov and 2 armed guards. They spoke briefly, then separated to different vehicles. Whitman is on the move, Sarah reported, heading to a black Escalade with security detail. Do not follow him, Sophia said urgently. Repeat, do not engage. The tactical team is mobilizing to your location. Sarah had a split second to decide. Following Whitman was risky, potentially suicidal, but letting him disappear, again possibly for another 5 years, she couldn't accept that outcome. I need to know where he's going, she said, starting her engine. If they're changing plans, accelerating the shipment, we need that intelligence. Sarah, don't. She removed the earpiece, silencing Sophia's objections. The Escalade was pulling out of the parking lot, turning north. Sarah waited until it was 2 blocks ahead, then followed at a discreet distance. For 30 minutes, she maintained surveillance as the Escalade traveled north on back roads, eventually turning onto a private drive leading to what appeared to be an abandoned airfield. Sarah stopped at the entrance, watching through binoculars as Whitman's vehicle approached a small hangar where lights now blazed. The hangar doors were open, revealing a twin-engine cargo plane being loaded by men in the same tactical gear she'd observed at the bar. Large crates were being transferred from a semi-trailer into the aircraft's cargo hold. They were moving the shipment tonight by air rather than road. The Seattle-Boise route had been a diversion, or perhaps a change of plans forced by unforeseen circumstances. Sarah documented the operation with her camera, capturing clear images of Whitman supervising the loading process. This was the evidence they needed: direct confirmation of his involvement in weapons trafficking. She was about to retreat and re-establish contact with Sophia when headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A vehicle approaching rapidly from behind, cutting off her escape route. Sarah reached for her weapon, then remembered she was unarmed, a deliberate choice for the test run to avoid raising suspicion if searched. Her options were limited: abandon the vehicle, and attempt to escape on foot through unfamiliar territory, or brazen it out as Jamie Carter. Before she could decide, the approaching vehicle, another black SUV, skidded to a stop behind her, blocking her in. Doors open, and armed men emerged, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted. "Out of the car now." Sarah raised her hands slowly, mind racing through scenarios. These weren't local police, they were Whitman's security team. Her cover was blown. She exited the vehicle as instructed, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The men approached cautiously, professional in their tactics. One grabbed her roughly, slamming her against the car to search her. "She's clean," he reported, finding no weapons. Another man stepped forward, Victor Kozlov, his expression grim. "Ms. Carter, or should I say Agent Blackwood?" Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew her real identity. "I don't know what you're talking about," she attempted, maintaining Jamie Carter's voice. Kozlov smiled without humor. "Save it. Facial recognition is a wonderful technology, especially when combined with access to sealed federal personnel files." He nodded to his men. "Bring her. Mr. Wilson will want to have a conversation before his departure." Sarah considered her options. Fighting now, outnumbered and unarmed, would likely end in her death. Better to play for time, hope that Sophia and Daniel had tracked her location despite her removing the earpiece. She allowed herself to be led toward the hangar, scanning constantly for escape opportunities. The airfield was isolated, with open ground surrounding the hangar complex, difficult terrain for an escape attempt. Her best chance would come inside, where the environment might offer cover or improvise weapons. Inside the hangar, the loading operation continued with military efficiency. The cargo plane, a modified Cessna Caravan with extended range tanks, was nearly full. Sarah counted at least 20 large crates, each bearing markings consistent with military weaponry. Whitman stood near the plane, examining a manifest. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from irritation to surprise, then to something more complex: recognition, followed by a cold smile. "I'm gonna have Blackwood," he said, handing the manifest to an assistant. "What an unexpected pleasure. Though I suppose I should have trusted my instincts when we met last night." There was something familiar about those eyes, even behind colored contacts. Sarah said nothing, assessing the situation. 12 armed men in the hangar, all with military bearing. The plane nearly loaded. Whitman seemingly in no hurry despite her capture, a concerning sign. "Nothing to say." Whitman stepped closer. "No declarations about justice or revenge. I'm almost disappointed." "Would it make a difference?" Sarah replied, her own voice now no longer maintaining the Jamie Carter pretense. Whitman chuckled. "No, I suppose not. Though I am curious, did you really think a wig and some makeup would fool me after Chicago?" "It fooled you for 24 hours, Sarah pointed out. "Long enough to document your entire operation. The FBI knows about this shipment, this location. They're on their way now." A calculated bluff, but one with potential truth behind it. If Sophia and Daniel had tracked her vehicle, the tactical team would indeed be mobilizing. Whitman seemed unconcerned. "Perhaps, but they won't arrive in time to prevent our departure. Or to save you, I'm afraid." He nodded to Kozlov, who produced a zip tie and secured Sarah's hands behind her back. The plastic cut into her wrists as he pulled it unnecessarily tight. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite the growing danger. "Now," Whitman checked his watch. "Now we complete our loading, depart for our destination, and decide what to do with you en route. I'm considering dropping you somewhere over the mountains. A certain symmetry to that, don't you think? You survived one of my bullets. Let's see if you can survive a fall from 15,000 feet. The casual cruelty was exactly what Sarah remembered from Chicago, the same tone Whitman had used before shooting her and leaving her for dead beside Michael's body. The weapons, she said, nodding toward the plane. Who are they for? Whitman raised an eyebrow. Professional curiosity, very well. They're headed for a conflict zone where such items command premium prices. The specifics aren't important, just another group of idealists willing to pay handsomely for the tools of their revolution. And in the Iron Vultures, just pawns in your operation. Useful intermediaries. Local muscle with convenient transportation networks and a talent for avoiding law enforcement attention. Whitman shrugged. Expendable like all assets eventually become. Sarah noted the last crate being loaded onto the plane. Time was running out. The tactical team, if they were coming, wouldn't arrive before the aircraft departed. She needed to act to create a diversion to buy time. Was there a mole, she asked suddenly, in Chicago, someone who betrayed our operation? Whitman's eyes narrowed slightly, the first genuine reaction she'd seen from him. You never figured it out, after all this time. Who was it? A slow smile spread across Whitman's face. It wasn't a who Agent Blackwood. It was a what. Your secure communications weren't as secure as you believed. Simple technology properly applied. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. All these years she'd suspected treachery from within, had withdrawn from her colleagues, her friends because of that suspicion. And it had been nothing more than a technological vulnerability. Whitman was watching her face, enjoying her reaction. You isolated yourself for nothing, pushed away your team, your support network, made yourself vulnerable. He leaned closer. That's why you're here alone now, with no backup, about to die, because you couldn't trust anyone. The words struck deeper than he knew, touching the core of Sarah's self-imposed isolation over the past 5 years. But they also triggered something else, a realization that she had been wrong. She did have people she could trust. Sophia, Daniel, even Ellis in his bureaucratic way. And they were coming for her. They had to be. The pilot approached Whitman. We're loaded and ready for departure, sir. Excellent. Whitman turned to Kozlov. Bring her aboard. We'll continue our conversation somewhere more private. As Kozlov gripped her arm to lead her toward the plane, Sarah made her move. She drove her head backward, connecting solidly with his nose. As he reeled from the impact, she dropped to one knee and swept her leg in a wide arc, taking his feet out from under him. Chaos erupted in the hangar. Armed men shouted, weapons raised. Whitman barked orders, his composure finally cracking. Sarah rolled behind a stack of empty crates as gunfire erupted, splintering the wood around her. With her hands still bound behind her back, options were limited, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She maneuvered through the maze of crates, staying low, using the confusion to her advantage. If she could reach the hangar door, there was a chance, slim but real, of escaping into the darkness outside. A figure appeared around the corner of her makeshift shelter, one of Whitman's security team. Before he could raise his weapon, Sarah launched herself forward, driving her shoulder into his midsection. They went down together, and she managed to roll to position her bound hands near his holstered sidearm. Her fingers closed around the weapon just as another guard rounded the corner, weapon aimed at her head. Sarah froze, caught in an impossible position. Then the hangar lights went out, plunging the space into darkness, broken only by emergency exit signs. Gunfire erupted from outside the hangar, precise, controlled bursts that Sarah recognized immediately as tactical team protocols. Sophia and Daniel had found her. The cavalry had arrived. In the darkness and confusion, Sarah managed to maneuver her bound hands under her legs, bringing them in front of her body. The zip tie was too tight to remove, but at least she could now use the weapon she'd acquired. Shouted commands echoed through the hangar, FBI announcing their presence, ordering everyone to surrender. Sarah stayed low, moving toward the exit, unwilling to risk being caught in the crossfire. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she caught movement near the plane, Whitman escorted by 2 guards climbing into the aircraft. He was escaping. Sarah couldn't let that happen. Not again. She moved with purpose, now using the tactical team's entry as cover for her own advance toward the plane. The Cessna's engines were already spinning up, the pilot preparing for an emergency departure despite the FBI presence. Sarah reached the edge of the tarmac just as Whitman pulled the plane's door closed. The aircraft began to taxi, turning toward the runway. In that moment, headlights illuminated the scene, a vehicle speeding across the airfield directly toward the taxiing plane. Sarah recognized it instantly. Daniel Jackson's SUV, with Sophia Martinez leaning out the passenger window, weapon aimed at the aircraft's engines. Sophia fired 3 precise shots. The right engine sputtered and died, black smoke pouring from the cowling. The plane veered sharply, coming to a stop at the edge of the runway. FBI tactical team members swarmed the aircraft, surrounding it with weapons drawn. The pilot emerged, first hands raised, then the security guards. But not Whitman. Sarah approached cautiously, her acquired weapon ready despite her bound hands. The tactical team had secured the perimeter, but they hadn't entered the aircraft yet, following protocols for potentially explosive situations. She felt rather than saw someone move up beside her, Daniel Jackson, tactical vest over his clothing, familiar, determined expression on his face. "You shouldn't be here," he said without looking at her. "Neither should you," she replied. "Thought you were just surveillance." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Plans change when teammates go rogue." He produced a knife and cut through her zip ties, freeing her hands. "He's still in there." "Yes." Daniel nodded to the tactical team commander, who gave a hand signal. The team prepared to breach the aircraft. Before they could move, the plane's door opened again. Charles Whitman emerged slowly, hands raised, face composed despite the chaos around him. "Special Agent Blackwood," he called, ignoring the shouted commands from the tactical team. "It seems your backup arrived after all." Sarah moved forward, weapon trained on Whitman's chest. The tactical team commander shouted for her to stand down, but she continued advancing until she stood at the foot of the plane's steps, looking up at the man who had killed her partner and tried to kill her. "Charles Whitman," she said formally, "you're under arrest for the murder of Special Agent Michael Chen, attempted murder of a federal agent, illegal weapons trafficking, and whatever else the prosecutors can think of." Whitman smiled, that same cold expression she remembered from Chicago. "Are you sure you wouldn't rather just pull that trigger, Agent Blackwood, after what I took from you after Michael?" For a moment, Sarah felt the temptation, the pull of vengeance, the simplicity of ending this man's life and calling it justice. Her finger tightened almost imperceptibly on the trigger. Then she felt a presence beside her. Sophia Martinez stepping up to stand shoulder to shoulder with her former teammate. "He's not worth it, Sarah," Sophia said quietly. "Michael wouldn't want this." The words penetrated the fog of revenge that had clouded Sarah's judgment. Michael wouldn't have wanted her to become a killer, to sacrifice her principles for vengeance. He had believed in justice, real justice through the system, however imperfect it might be. "On your knees," Sarah ordered, her voice steady. "Hands behind your head." Whitman's smile faded as he realized she wouldn't be provoked. Slowly he complied, kneeling at the top of the steps. The tactical team moved in, securing Whitman with professional efficiency. As they led him past Sarah, he paused briefly. "This isn't over," he said softly. "Men like me, we don't stay in cages." Sarah met his gaze evenly. "Then I'll be waiting when you try to leave yours." As Whitman was led away, the adrenaline that had sustained Sarah began to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She became aware of injuries she hadn't noticed in the heat of the moment. Bruised ribs from her takedown of Kozlov, a cut on her forehead that was bleeding freely, the raw skin of her wrists from the zip ties. Sophia and Daniel flanked her, providing silent support. Behind them, the tactical team was securing the hangar, documenting the weapons cache, arresting the remaining Iron Vultures and Whitman's security personnel. "You removed your earpiece," Sophia said, a note of accusation in her voice. "I needed to concentrate," Sarah replied. "How did you find me?" "The tracker in your shoe," Daniel answered. "Standard procedure when a teammate goes off-grid." Sarah looked down at her boots, surprised. "When did you bus gas station?" Sophia explained. "When you stopped on the way back from the test run. You're not the only one who can be sneaky, Blackwood." Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. They had anticipated her actions, had prepared contingencies. They had known her well enough to predict she might go rogue, and they had been ready. They had never stopped being her team. Director Ellis arrived 30 minutes later, his expression a complex mix of relief, irritation, and professional satisfaction as he surveyed the captured weapons and arrested suspects. "Agent Blackwood," he greeted her pointedly, using her former title. "I believe I ordered you to stand down." "You did, sir," Sarah acknowledged. "I exercised my judgment to disregard that order based on developing circumstances." Ellis raised an eyebrow. Developing circumstances, like Whitman potentially escaping again. Among other factors. Ellis sighed, but there was a hint of fondness beneath his exasperation. Your methods remain unorthodox. But the results? He gestured to the hangar where FBI evidence technicians were cataloging what appeared to be millions of dollars worth of illegal weapons. The results speak for themselves. Sarah nodded, accepting the backhanded compliment. What about the Iron Vulture's leadership, Mercer Kozlov? Rounded up at the Broken Spoke simultaneously with our operation here. Martinez's idea, a coordinated strike to prevent anyone slipping away in the confusion. Sarah glanced at Sophia, who shrugged modestly. Just good operational planning. A medic approached to examine Sarah's injuries, but she waved him off. In a minute, she turned back to Ellis. What happens now? Now, Ellis considered. Now we process one of the largest weapons seizures in Bureau history. We dismantle Whitman's trafficking network. We build an airtight case that puts him away for consecutive life sentences. And me? Ellis studied her face. That depends. What do you want Sarah back to trucking or? He left the alternative unspoken but clear. Sarah looked around at the organized chaos of the crime scene FBI agents, documenting evidence, securing suspects, following the protocols she had once known by heart. She looked at Sophia and Daniel standing nearby, the teammates who had come for her, despite her pushing them away for 5 years. I need to think about it, she said finally. Ellis nodded. Take your time. But know that there's a place for you if you want it. The Bureau could use someone with your particular skills and determination. He moved away to coordinate with the tactical team leader, leaving Sarah with her former teammates. He's been trying to recruit you back for years, Sophia revealed. Even had a special position in mine instructor at Quantico, training the next generation of undercover operatives. Pushing papers, teaching classrooms full of rookies. Sarah shook her head. Not my style. Field advisor, Daniel corrected. Working actual operations, mentoring agents in real-world scenarios. The kind of position that would value your experience without requiring you to conform to the usual bureau structures. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You've discussed this? We might have had a conversation or two, Sophia admitted, over the past 5 years, while you were off playing trucker. There was no judgment in her voice, just gentle teasing between old friends. Sarah felt something shift in her, a wall beginning to crumble, a weight starting to lift. I needed the time, she said quietly. After Chicago, after Michael. Daniel nodded. We know. But you don't have to do everything alone anymore, Sarah. That's what got you into trouble tonight. And what got me out of it? She acknowledged, looking at her friends with new appreciation. As dawn broke over the airfield, casting long shadows from the hangar, Sarah watched Whitman being loaded into a secure transport vehicle. Their eyes met briefly through the window predator and prey roles now reversed. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a sense of completion. A chapter ending, perhaps a new one beginning. The ghost that had haunted her for 5 years was finally exorcised. 3 days later, Sarah Blackwood stood in Joe's garage in Spokane, packing the last of her surveillance equipment. Her truck was fueled and ready, her legitimate shipping business still operational despite her brief return to bureau work. The door opened, admitting Sophia and Daniel. They had been debriefing in Seattle, helping to build the case against Whitman and the Iron Vulture's leadership. So you're really going back to trucking? Sophia asked, perching on the edge of the workbench. Sarah closed her equipment case. For now, I've got deliveries scheduled, clients expecting their shipments. And after that, Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. After that, Sarah looked around the garage at the truck that had been her home and cover for 5 years. After that, I'll consider Ellis's offer. No promises. Sophia smiled. That's more than he expected. He thought you'd disappear again once the operation was over. I considered it, Sarah admitted. Old habits. Bad habits, Daniel corrected, echoing Sophia's earlier assessment. Sarah nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. I'm working on it. They helped her load the last of her belongings into the truck. When everything was secured, Sarah faced her former teammates, her friends feeling an unexpected reluctance to leave. Thank you, she said simply, for coming when I needed you, even though I didn't ask. Sophia pulled her into a tight hug. That's what teammates do. Remember that next time you're tempted to go lone wolf on us. Daniel hugged her next, his grip strong and reassuring. The offer stands whenever you're ready. The Bureau needs people like you, Sarah. People who understand the cost of the work but do it anyway. Sarah nodded, emotion tightening her throat. I'll be in touch. Soon. She climbed into her truck, the familiar cab comforting after the intensity of the past few days. As she started the engine, Sophia called up to her. What about the pendant? You going to start wearing it again? Sarah touched her neck where the FBI tactical unit emblem had once hung. She had retrieved it from her equipment cache but hadn't put it back on. Maybe, she said thoughtfully. When I'm ready. She pulled out of the garage, heading for the open road that had been her refuge for 5 years. But this time, as the miles unwound beneath her wheels, Sarah felt different. Lighter somehow, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. In her rearview mirror, Sophia and Daniel stood watching her departure, hands raised in farewell. Not goodbye, Sarah realized, just until next time. The Montana landscape unfolded around her as she drove, vast and beautiful in the summer sunshine. The road ahead was clear, stretching to the horizon and beyond. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah Blackwood felt herself looking forward rather than back. The ghosts of Chicago finally quieted, if not completely silenced. She would deliver her shipments, fulfill her contracts, and then perhaps it would be time for a new chapter. Not a return to the past, but something different, a future that incorporated all she had been and all she had become. FBI agent, trucker, survivor. The highway stretched before her, a ribbon of possibility cutting through the heart of America. Sarah Blackwood, the trucker girl who had flipped a man into a windshield and captured one of the FBI's most wanted, pressed the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next, ready at last to find out who she might become.